Hello, my name is Evan DeMartian with the Trends Journal. I'm happy to be here today with Matthew Ho from the Eisenhower Media Network. Matthew, thank you for joining the Trends Journal as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on, Ed.
We have big developments in China. Trump's out there. He's meeting with Xi. And the Taiwan issue seems to be a central theme of what's developing, at least from today's reports, between the U.S. and China. Do you think China is exploiting the Iran war and at least perceived weakness in the U.S. military, or do you think that doesn't play much of a role and this is just was going to happen anyway?
No, I think that the centrality of Taiwan and all this it's been this way for decades, and that was going to play a role in these talks regardless. But to your point, the understanding of the Chinese of the position they're in with respect to the United States and the possibility of a war with Taiwan. This Iran war has demonstrated just how superficial the U.S. military really is. I mean, the idea that the United States military, a military that under both Biden and Trump couldn't regain control of the Red Sea from the Houthis, from Ansar Allah, and they have proven ineffective at best against the Iranians. I mean, just one leaked report after another over these last couple of weeks, which, on another note, those leaked reports to the Times and CNN and the Washington Post and NBC News by the CIA and the Pentagon, deliberate, coordinated, most likely, this idea that the American national security establishment is saying as loud as it can, do not restart this war. This war is not in our favor. We can't win this war. Iran has the upper hand. I mean, all this understanding we have about the underperformance of the American military in this war has to be telling the Chinese the Americans are not serious about being able to defend Taiwan. Now, certainly they have their concerns about the United States because we are so belligerent. And the only tool the American empire it seems to possess is the military tool. And certainly even our economic tools are militarized, so I think this relationship of Taiwan as central to American-Chinese affairs, as it has been for decades now. I think the Chinese probably are looking at this in a way of like, this will remain a talking point. This will remain something that the Americans beat their chests about. But we all know that it's make-believe. We all know that the United States would have to evacuate their bases in South Korea, Japan, Okinawa, the Philippines, just like they had to evacuate their bases in Kuwait and Bahrain and and Qatar, et cetera. As well as, too, I think those Asian countries need to reckon with the reality, as has been demonstrated, that in a war over Taiwan, a war with China, their fates would be similar to the fates of the Gulf states. And again, that's Iran. We're talking about China, much larger, much more potent, much more capable, right? And certainly not fighting a war in the position that Iran has been in, over the last decades. I mean, we look at what the Iranians did in terms of their targeting of American bases using, from what we can gather, one Chinese satellite. Right? They used one Chinese satellite and they forced the Americans to evacuate all their bases in the region. You just look at this. And so I think a lot of us are saying the Americans have to evacuate those countries. We couldn't hold Guam. We might even have to evacuate Pearl Harbor if we fight the Chinese. I don't know how you look at this and come away with anything other than that. In terms of what the Americans would bring to warfare, what the Chinese would bring to warfare, what we can deduce based off of these last rounds of warfare, either in the Red Sea or in the Persian Gulf, that wouldn't be the way it would shake out. And there's all kinds of things, all things we can go into, all details or evidence. I mean, the fact that we couldn't bring our aircraft carriers within 1,000 kilometers of the Iranian coastline, in Taiwan is what, 150 kilometers from China? How the hell are we going to defend Taiwan? If we can't even get 1,000 kilometers close to Iran, a country that has been besieged, blockaded, ruined with proxy war, sabotaged, assassinations. For decades now. And they're able to hold off the Americans that way. What do we expect from a war with China?
Do you think the U.S. would have a higher pain threshold to defend Taiwan than it has against Iran, meaning Trump, even though he's happy to bomb Iran with airstrikes launched probably from hundreds of miles away, do you think the U.S. would be more committed militarily to defend Taiwan and its influence in that sphere?
No, I mean, my understanding of the way the United States Navy is poised is that the United States Navy would pull back, get its fleet out of danger, and then enter back in. Right. So you get out of that, you get out of danger, back into a safe space, assemble, and go back. That's my understanding of how they intend to do it. More importantly than that, though, Ed, is the idea that, as we've known, both the Biden and the Trump administrations, the American plan is basically scorched earth in Taiwan. The American plan is to destroy the Taiwanese semiconductor factories, is to destroy the Taiwanese infrastructure, is to make it so that if China takes Taiwan, they're not getting anything, right? I mean, the semiconductor plants that build what, 3/4 of the world's semiconductors or whatever they are, they will not fall into the hands of the Chinese. That is my understanding, as said out loud by both the Biden administration and the Trump administration, that would be the way that we would ensure China would not have success. So now, and that's not just the South Koreans, the Japanese, the Thais, the Vietnamese, the Filipinos, the Australians, whoever, looking at this and saying, good God, we're a buffer for the Americans, and the Americans are going to evacuate their bases here, and we're going to take the punishment from the Chinese. But also, too, I think the Taiwanese have to really reckon with the false promise, the dream of an American defense of Taiwan. One, again, demonstrated that the Americans couldn't even defend Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain from the Iranians, right? But a larger role is that the Americans are saying that we will burn Taiwan down as part of our strategy to ensure the Chinese don't achieve victory here. And so I think, throughout the region there, that has to be a consideration. I don't know why they're not already ejecting the Americans at this point, because that's the way this thing would go.
I think I remember Seth Moulton, the representative from Massachusetts, was in like a panel like 2 years ago or something, and he said he let it out that I think bombers would bomb the TSMC,
exactly,
something like that, and he was corrected. He was quickly corrected by a woman. She's like a big, I forget the name, but she was like, "Oh no, that would not be our strategy." But he kind of let it out.
Right, that's our strategy. That's the plan.
Basically,
that's the plan: is to pull our forces back away from the Chinese, right, and destroy what they want to get, and then hopefully then the Chinese sue for peace, right? And it doesn't escalate beyond there. That you've taken away what the Chinese are trying to attain. You've gotten most of your forces out of harm's way, and now you're threatening the Chinese essentially with a counterattack here. And so the Chinese would then say, you know what? Yeah, the semiconductor plants are burned down. There's really nothing here of value. We really want to get into this fight with the Americans. But as we can see, the Americans, where's the American attack coming from? From what? I mean, we certainly have, from what objective analysts say, very capable undersea warfare. So I think the Chinese view our subs and our undersea drones as something that they have to be very concerned, that they are concerned about. But everything else, what are they concerned about? I mean, the Chinese have built generations of ballistic missiles and anti-ship missiles and cruise missiles and now drones with the very real dedicated purpose of destroying our surface fleets. And again, if our carriers can't get 1,000 kilometers from Iran, where are we going to fight? Where are we going to fight China from? It just makes no sense. And then you just also, too, you look at the mass of China, right? The ability of force that they be able to bring. And we have to believe, because of their manufacturing capacity, because of their planned and coordinated industrial capacity, that the Chinese would not run out of munitions in 4 weeks and have to call a ceasefire like we did with Iran, right? I mean, so you look at the fact that after 5 weeks, that's not shortchanging it, 5 weeks, the Americans were down to half their THAAD stocks, half their Patriot stocks, half their JASSM missiles, right? And we got to call a ceasefire. And for all the bluster and it's the ceasefire has been going on for more than a month now. And as we were just saying before, you've got the CIA and the Pentagon telling all their friends in corporate media, reliable national security partners, members of the military industrial complex themselves, like NBC News and CNN, that, look, this is the reality. We can't keep fighting this war. If it's simple, right? If tell me if my math is wrong, because I'm not a math scientist, but if it took 5 weeks for us to get down to 50% of our Patriot and THAAD stocks, then if the Iranians fight us for 6 weeks, don't we run out? Isn't that the very simple arithmetic that we're looking at here? And so, as well as too, the reality that our standoff missiles, people might say, oh, look, you've only expended a third of your Tomahawks. Most of our Tomahawks, I don't even know if they used any of the ground launched Tomahawks, from the Typhoon. I don't think they did, so it was all sea launched Tomahawks. Well, we got still 2/3 of those. That's a lot. That's thousands and thousands of missiles. But the Tomahawks only have a range of about 1,000 miles. So if you're firing them out from 700 miles away, 1,000 kilometers away, and you're using up a lot of their range, because the Tomahawk's advantage is being able to go around things and take a circuitous route to the target so the enemy doesn't see it's coming, you really can't reach that far into Iran then with the Tomahawks. And if you've blown through half of your JASSMs already, the Joint Air Standoff Missile, if you've blown through half of those, probably most of your extended range ones, the ones that have 600-mile ranges, as opposed to the 300-mile range ones, now you're starting to talk about having to put a lot more manned aircraft over Iran itself, and the idea of getting your planes shot down. And we saw that despite the assertions of the Pentagon and their apologists and proxies and cheerleaders on social media and on cable news and everything, the United States does not have air superiority over Iran, let alone air dominance. We have localized air superiority over parts of Iran, and we can produce air superiority if we produce if we send a large enough package to suppress the enemy air defenses in a local area. But the idea of just being able to fly our F-15s and F-16s or F-18s willy-nilly over Iran and not have them get shot down so they can drop gravity bombs or they can drop JDAMs even, just not the way that war actually is. So the options here for the Americans are really poor. And now you get back to, okay, now let's extrapolate that. Let's make this war bigger. Let's go from the 92 million person country of Iran to the 1.4 billion country of China. Let's go from Iran that has been blockaded and sanctioned for decades. That's economy is incredibly poor and anemic, but somehow they can build their own weapon systems. Let's jump now to China, right? The world's engine, world's manufactured engine, the world's, all the things we could say about the strength of China's economy, the strength of its industries, right?
Rare earths too.
All of it, right? And so you say, my God, again, I point to the fact that everyone went crazy because of that one Chinese satellite that allowed the Iranians to target American bases. But the Chinese themselves have more than one satellite, just kind of, we start looking at in that sense. And so back to your thing about Donald Trump in Iran. Donald Trump in Beijing. He goes to Beijing, and the Chinese know that the Americans have been running their mouths. Lindsey Graham and Rick Scott and others, the think tanks, commentators on CNN and Fox and other places, about how the war in Iran is really not about Iran. It's about China. It's about isolating China. It's about taking away China's energy supplies from the Gulf, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the Chinese know this, and the Chinese saw that it didn't work. And the Americans did their best to isolate us, and they failed. And now here comes the American president who's stuck in a war that he can't get out of without losing, an unpopular war that he should get out of, we should say, but he doesn't seem to be able to. And the United States that's not prepared, not ready, not going to be able to sustain the economic costs. The reality is that you have an Iran that has for decades withstood international siege, that's withstood the sanctions and the blockade, that has dealt with either real warfare like in the 80s or certainly hybrid warfare, cyber attacks, assassinations, sabotage, and they are able to weather the economic warfare that is the major, right, the major effect of this war. Now, the Gulf states, who the United States are using to play chicken with Iran in this economic warfare, who's going to collapse first? I don't think the Gulf states are anywhere near as capable or have the wherewithal to withstand this economic warfare the way the Iranians are. And now you take one other step in the Americans, and it's coming to us, right? The economic costs we're feeling already, but a lot of it's very latent, and whether it's the actual petroleum or gas or all the byproducts, the American economy is going to feel that. We're already feeling, and we've already got a weak economy. Yeah. And so if anyone thinks that the American public, American economy, or American political system is in a position to sustain or weather or survive the costs of this war, I'm not sure what they're looking at, but certainly all the things that we're looking at, whether it's this impending bond crisis, whether it's the housing market, whether it's the inflation numbers, whether it's the credit card and auto debt that's becoming more and more delinquent. I mean, like, all the indicators are out there that we are in a really bad spot. I keep seeing things referencing the last time we were at this place was 2007. The last time we were at this place was 2008, right? I mean, and now you're going to have the effects of it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when Trump is over in China, you're talking about how China's helping Iran with the radar images and satellite images. And it's like he's saying, oh my God, I'm such good friends with Xi. Oh, this is amazing. You guys are amazing. It's funny how Trump, he's such a bully to other countries. When it comes to a peer competitor, he's not as tough of a guy.
No, he's my good friend. We're really good friends, and everything else he says.
Yeah. But it's funny. I was wondering, I just thought this now, so this is not a theory. I want to hear your take on this. Everything could you make the case that what the U.S. is doing in Iran, what they did against the Houthis, what they did in the Caribbean, each scenario, each atmosphere, or what do you call where the war's taking place? There's a technical name for it.
Like each theater, or
it's theater, exactly.
Yeah.
Each theater seems like something that you could kind of learn in the process of preparing to defend Taiwan. Do you think there's any risk not risk, but that there's a ladder that the U.S. is going through right now that we're going to hit these drug boats off of Venezuela as step one. We're going to fight the Houthis in the Red Sea, step two. Now it's Iran, step three. We're learning how to deal with their long-range missiles and their ballistic missile capability, all in preparation to, potentially go to war with China and face a military like the Chinese that doesn't have that kind of real world experience. Is that a crazy theory?
You'll hear that from people. I remember hearing it about Afghanistan when the United States was escalating the war in Afghanistan in 2009. We're going to take all the lessons we learned in Iraq and use them to win in Afghanistan. I think the idea that this is all interconnected in some types of grand strategy that it has been devised by the White House to achieve what it wanted to achieve with the national security strategy might make sense if it wasn't continuing to do the things that it said it wasn't going to do anymore. And particularly, overextending the military, keeping itself committed into the Middle East, carrying out operations for which there's no real great American gain. I mean, we saw this at the beginning of the Trump administration, the beginning of this Trump administration, the second administration, when those leaked, when Mike Waltz and Pete Hegseth put Jeffrey Goldberg from the Atlantic on their Signal chat, or their WhatsApp chat or whatever it was.
It was Signal. It was Signal.
Signal. And the commentary, I think from Vance, maybe it was, I can't remember who at this point, it was Vance or one of those two, said basically why about Operation Rough Rider, which was going to be the American task force that went into the Red Sea and reopened it and beat down on the Houthis and made them realize that the Trump administration is not same as the Biden administration, and don't mess with us, kind of thing. Know your place. Some of the commentary was like, why are we doing this? We get, only, I can't remember off the top of my head what exactly it was, but 5% of our trade goes through the Red Sea. The Red Sea is not important to us. This is a matter for Europe. Why are we here, kind of thing. And you see that again and again, and Donald Trump uses that as a cop out for the Straits of Hormuz. I should just walk away. We don't need the Straits of Hormuz. This is other people's problems. Right. I would say, maybe there was some idea of how these things would build upon each other in order to, again, recalibrate the American empire, to anchor it in the West. But some of this this war with the incredible commitment to the Middle East here, You could say it's creative destruction. Donald Trump is playing 5D chess. I don't think so. Like, is this the idea of like, we're going to launch a war and then Iran's going to blow up our bases and then we won't have any bases in the Middle East and that gets us out of the Middle East, right? I mean, I don't know. That's a little much, I think, I mean, like, but it will maybe in, some perverse, right, bizarre, upside down way, the national security strategy is achieved by the Americans not doing the national security strategy, by doing, continuing with, and that's why this war is really, when you look at it, Ed, to me, this war with Iran is a war of the 20th century versus the 21st century. Not just the way that the United States is fighting with 20th century bases and 20th century super carriers, not just the way that Iran is fighting. We're going to destroy your $1 billion radar array with our $6,000 drone, but also too other ways that I think are being felt and understood in Beijing these last couple of days. The idea of just the need for the Americans to hold on to what they once had, that they can't give up on the American century. They can't give up on the American imperial order. And they're just running into the reality of history that, yes, you will give up on it. And it's your choice how you give up on it. And, there's other things too. It's this idea that the United States for how long now has been able to bomb other countries without any consequence to the American people. And, certainly some of us would go to war. Some didn't come back. A few families roughly in the United States felt the consequences of those wars. There were the fiscal costs of the war, which are nebulous or vague or at best indirect for most people. You talk about the trillions of dollars this adds to debt and how this gives an austerity mindset in Congress and how there's opportunity costs that come when you spend $2 trillion on the war in Afghanistan and $2 trillion on the war in Iraq and overall $8 trillion when it's all said and done. But people don't feel that directly.
Yeah.
But now, and the United States bombs Iran and Spirit Airlines goes out of business, right? I mean, so this 21st century economy, this globalized economy, right? This interconnected economy, the United States cannot wage war and not have those consequences, those costs felt here. I mean, this is, whether it's because of how our corporations are financed, how they're sustained, whether it's the idea of the supply chains, the just-in-time logistics, all those different things that give us the global economy we have now, makes the American economy very vulnerable. And then there are things, I don't think Iran's going to do this, but the reality that Iran is demonstrating that adversaries can fight back very effectively, very potently, very significantly with 21st century technology. I mean, so this maybe the idea of Iran, having undersea drones that could launch missiles to hit the American. I mean, that's what they'll claim, But the reality is that they could do that, or any adversary could do that. The North Koreans are launching a new ship class right now that would have the ability to strike the United States with missiles. So, this idea of the 20th century war as the Americans knew it is gone. And whether or not the United States, though, is going to actually give up on that idea, a lot of it's because it's too good of a grift. It's too good of a thing. People are making billions and billions and billions of dollars. I mean, you got Pete Hegseth in Congress saying that a $500 billion increase in the defense budget is fiscally responsible. Again, as 30-year treasuries go over 5%, right? Right.
But it's crazy. But Matt, most Americans that never served in the military, they understand the military by watching Saving Private Ryan. Yeah. They watch Top Gun Maverick. They watch all these movies that really glamorize and glorify war and the U.S. role in these wars and how everything's tightly condensed to one area. Nothing else is impacted except for the heroes fighting the enemies. And I feel like so much of Americans that's what we know about war who've never served in the military. Hollywood's done such a job on so many Americans that they don't consider the innocent civilians getting killed, the
Right.
economy going down the toilet. But I wanted to talk to you. You mentioned earlier in an interview about the U.S. national security establishment with leaks into the corporate media. And one of your posts before was a New York Times link, and it said, Iran has restored, this is from New York Times, Iran has restored operational access to 30 of 33 missile sites it maintains along the Strait of Hormuz. Iran regained access to roughly 90% of its underground missile storage and launch facilities. And then you wrote, we depleted crucial munition stocks for this outcome. When you talk about the national security establishment, can you explain? Can you go in a little bit more of a detail on what you see is happening? They're trying to get out of Iran, and do you think Trump would listen? Do you think the war's over, or do you think that it's going to continue?
I don't think Trump is listening to anyone outside of his little circle and his friends on Fox News, and it's really dangerous, right? So he's listening to those who are immediately around him, handpicked, I guess, handpicked by Susie Wiles. You see this we haven't seen Tulsi Gabbard in a year, right? I mean, John Ratcliffe replaced her. Gabbard is the director of national intelligence. Technically, John Ratcliffe's boss. Ratcliffe is director of Central Intelligence. But I think it became very apparent that if you don't say things Donald Trump doesn't want to hear, you're not in the room. And any of us who've watched those ghastly cabinet meetings where it's just one after another, they're just trying to be a better sycophant than right. Talk
about North Korea. Talk about North Korea.
Yeah, right. I mean, it is just. So I think there's that reality. He's not listening, or he's listening to Mark Levitt or Hugh Hewitt or Sean Hannity or whoever on Fox. And God help us, Jack Keane. I think Jack Keane, so, according to either The Economist or Politico, I can't remember which, there's credit to Jack Keane for the idea of the blockade, that it was Jack Keane's idea of the blockade that got into Donald Trump's head. Again, I can't remember that Politico or The Economist that said that. But anyway, but this idea, we were just talking about the national security establishment, the deep state, if you will, right? Their understanding of the war as it really is, and their understanding of the fact that this war, if it continues, if it restarts, it's not in the United States' favor, is been demonstrated over the last few weeks through these successive leaks to these major outlets. First in the New York Times, there was a leak about the stocks of Iranian munitions. I mean, all through that air campaign over those 5 weeks and then into the ceasefire, you heard throughout the American press, throughout the Western press, the Israeli press, 90% of Iran's missile launchers have been destroyed. They're down to 20% of their drones, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And you have this leak to the New York Times, now, I guess 2 weeks ago now. No, that's not the case. They've got 75% of their launchers, 70% of their missiles. Their drones may be at 40%, but I think most of us who are observing us understand the Iranians can at least build 100 to 200 drones a day. So essentially, they can fight this war forever. The Iranians were firing a sustained rate of drone and missiles of between 100 and 130 a day, which was overwhelming. Slowly, the Iranians were fighting both a 21st century asymmetric war, as well as using a symmetric attritional warfare, essentially slugging it out with the Americans and the Israelis and the Arabs, and coming up at the end of the 5 weeks of the campaign in a better position in terms of stockpiles, in terms of who's winning in this war of attrition, who has more wherewithal than the other. Well, according to the leak from the Pentagon to the New York Times, and then a couple of days later, another leak to CNN that juxtaposes, okay, on Monday, you got this leak to the Times saying, here are where the Iranians are in terms of their stockpiles, and here is where we are, according to our stockpiles, right? Like, we are down to 50% or less of our THAAD and Patriot missile defense interceptors. We are down to less than half of our JASSMs. We have we've expended a third of our Tomahawks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So you're looking at this and you're saying, all right, after 5 weeks, the Iranians have a lot more missiles and drones left to fire than the Americans do to shoot back or actually have standoff offensive missiles. And once we run out of those, then the Americans have to push manned aircraft into Iran, and we're going to have the Iranians shooting down our manned aircraft. The next leak was the leak to NBC News, again, 2 or 3 or 4 days later, saying, hey, the Iranians completely devastated 16 of our bases, or whatever the number is, and here's what they did. Here at Camp Arifjan, A, B, C, D, right? Fifth Fleet headquarters in Manama, Bahrain, A, B, C, D, right? I mean, making it clear that not only did the Americans evacuate the bases, which everyone knew, we all knew this, and we understood the extent of the damage. People like you, myself, the guests you have on here, the folks you have listening, watching, we knew all this because we pay attention to other sources of media, whether they're independent sources, direct sources online. So literally, you're watching video feed of some dude in Bahrain who videoed, 6 Iranian ballistic missiles just strike Fifth Fleet headquarters, or the foreign media that's been reporting on this. So you referenced earlier watching Al Jazeera, that type of thing. And so those of us in our sphere, including the audience here, understood this. But most people in the U.S., I don't think, had an understanding of just what level of damage and destruction the Iranians did to the American bases in the region. The Americans, the way they sold it was that we're evacuating our non-combatants, we're evacuating our non-essential personnel. And the reality was no, the base is shut down. They relocated Fifth Fleet headquarters from Bahrain back to Central Command headquarters in Florida, right? I mean, so Al-Udeid Air Base, which is where Air Force Central Command is, and other places like that, essentially meaningless at this point. I mean, so you had that, and then you had another leak. Now this one is maybe a week later. This was last week in the Washington Post that said, the CIA did a study and they looked at Iran. And they said that, if the Straits of Hormuz remain closed, if this blockade against them is effective, it's certainly going to hurt. It's going to be painful, but they're in no risk of economic collapse for months to come. Because, as we were saying earlier, they've been through it before. And they have a population that is steeled for this war, that this war has produced a rally around the flag effect in Iran, right? I may not like this government, but to hell with the idea of what the foreigners are doing to us. And so then, of course, you take that Washington Post story, right? And that's up against this idea of like the Iranians are going to collapse in 2 or 3 more days. The Iranians are going to collapse next week. What the Post story doesn't say is, like I said earlier, the Americans are playing chicken in this economic warfare with the Iranians using the Arab states. And so you look at where, say, Kuwait is, you look at, say, where Iraq is, you look at, say, where Qatar are in terms of Bahrain, their economies, even the UAE. We had those reports a few weeks ago that the UAE came to the door of the Treasury, and say, hey, Mr. Percent, you need to do a currency swap with us because we're running out of dollars, man. Our currency is about to fall through the floor here. So you have that very real idea, this understanding that the Arabs are going to collapse before the Iranians do. And then, of course, the other thing wasn't said is that how well are the Americans going to fare through this? And we kind of went through that before. And then there was just another leak again yesterday, 2 days ago in the Times that summarized a lot of this, right? As well as then readers think of like, hey, and again, if you forgot by now, the Iranians are at about 3/4 of their missile fleet, their launchers and their missiles. They only expended about 1/4 of them. Maybe the United States, as well. Then too, pointing out that the Americans know of 33 launch sites along the coast that the Iranians can use against ships or whatever, and they've reoccupied and are using 30 of them. And I guarantee there's more launch sites that we don't know, but this is what they're saying, right? I mean, so you just keep looking at this and you say, have you ever seen the American security establishment? Have you ever seen the Pentagon, the CIA put out this much information?
Yeah, good.
To its most reliable partners, NBC, CNN, the Times, the Post, in opposition to the White House. Have you ever seen the CIA, the Pentagon put out information like this to keep us out of war, right? I mean, and so some of it, Ed, is likely these institutions jockeying to be excused from blame. So when this thing is over, the idea that, look, we said that this wasn't going to work, or we didn't want to restart this thing, so it's a lot of CYA, I think, too. But most of it, I really do believe, is the very sincere understanding by the American, by the Pentagon, by the CIA, that this war is a war that the United States cannot win and will likely prove disastrous if it's restarted.
And you think a lot of these people that are these leaked sources, do you think they're sitting in a room shaking their head, yes, that we should keep going, yes, we have them right on the ropes? Do you think they're telling these news outlets one thing and Trump officials another thing?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, exactly. The colonel that sends this over to, or the 2-star general or 1-star, whoever who sends this information over to NBC, is he then going to meet with his bosses and they sitting in a room with Hegseth and being, oh, no, sorry, everything's good. No, I think they probably are producing, sending this information up as they have it, and just getting a wall back. I mean, I saw this in Afghanistan. I saw it in Iraq. I mean, the idea that what does the boss want? People don't. This is the same as any other organization. The idea of sending up information that disagrees with what the boss wants or what the boss believes, that's not going to get you promoted. That's not going to get you a better, right? I mean, this is just organizational institution issues like you have anywhere. And we do have a history of highly politicized intelligence. Throughout the wars, you had in around 2014, 2015, you had 50 or 60 intelligence analysts at Central Command go to the Inspector General because the information that they were sending up to Lloyd Austin, who became Joe Biden's Secretary of Defense, but when Lloyd Austin was the Central Command, was the commanding general of Central Command, the information that his intelligence analysts were giving him about the war in Syria, that wasn't the information that Austin was passing on to the White House, right? I mean, this is how it works, how it's always worked, probably always will work. And I think you have these men and women throughout the Pentagon and CIA who are, part of it's CYA, but a lot of it is trying to keep this war from happening again by letting people know this is what it's like. The idea being you get this story in the New York Times right before Pete Hegseth goes to Capitol Hill, right?
Disastrous.
I mean, right. So that at least you have, the members of the House Armed Services Committee or Senate Armed Services Committee, at least they can ask stuff based upon that. And then it gets under Trump's skin. He writes, he calls us all treasonous and writes about it on Truth Social. So he's aware of it, which is good, but it doesn't change what he's hearing from his people on Fox News and everything else, as well as to the pressure they're getting from the Israelis, and as well as just the inertia of decades upon decades, 47 years of the United States empire needing to reassemble or undo what occurred in 1979. I mean, so there's just a whole belief system, articles of faith in Washington, D.C. around Iran, that Iran is America's principal adversary. It's the chief sponsor of state terrorism, et cetera, that it upended the American imperial order, and that needs to be fixed. So there's all these things I think that are there that put pressure on the president to continue the war, as well as his own, most importantly, his own need for his own self-interest, I should say, right? How does he prove that he took on and confronted the mullahs in Tehran in a way that no one else did? He says it all the time. 47 years, and president has stood up to Iran. Not even Ronald Reagan would stand up to Iran, And so how does he get out of this situation where he's able to say it? Now, it's Donald Trump, so he'll say whatever he wants. But there has to be, I think, for him, something really to hold on to. And it looks as if it's crystallized now around the nuclear program.
Yes.
The Americans seem to have dropped their concerns about the Iran's missile and drone program, or Iran's alliances with Hezbollah or Hamas or what have you. It seems to be that. And so is there some type of agreement that can be reached? Can we produce semantics that make it so both the president of the United States and Iran's supreme leader can say, we won, and hopefully, the idea being is that a modus vivendi is established. I think this indefinite ceasefire can continue for a very long time, and both sides can be happy with it, right? Because, particularly too, if Iran's toll system is coming up, and they're still able to get some of their ships out. But, I think it was JP Morgan had calculated that if the toll system works the way Iran is saying it's going to work, it's going to provide 25% of Iran's GDP, right? I mean, you're looking at probably
incredible. What a win!
$5 to $30 billion in revenue for it. So whatever, the billions that they're losing in revenue through this blockade, and I don't even believe blockade's really doing anything, but say it is, just for sake of argument, it's still, you put pen to paper. And, and the Iranians said today 30 ships went through the Straits of Hormuz. I think they're all Chinese ships, or a lot of them were Chinese ships.
I think so.
Yeah,
they paid an environmental cost. I think China said they didn't pay a toll,
right?
But Iran, they're paying an environmental tax,
call it whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And it's better for us too. I mean, if you look at it, in like, say Iran charges $1 a barrel of oil, right? And those ships hold it's $2 million. I mean, it adds up. But for us, gosh, which would you rather have? Would you rather have oil at $110 a barrel, as it currently is, or whatever it is today? I haven't looked at it today, at 110 or 105 or over 100, which the estimates say it's going to be over 90 for a couple of years, even if things go back to normal. Even if best case, you're looking at over 100 through this year, or over 90 through this year, and not settling back down for a couple of years, or would you rather have oil be at, like Brent was at 67 or so roughly when this thing started? I think I'd rather have Brent be 68, than, so the Iranians want to have that toll, knock themselves out. It's better for us all if that's the way this thing is resolved than, anything else. But
I have one last question for you, Matt Ho from the Eisenhower Media Network. My last question is, a lot of analysis have been looking at Iran and its response to Trump's demands to end the war. Iran saying that we are not going to even discuss our nuclear program in this round of negotiations. First, you have to remove the blockade, get pay the reparations for war damage. Yeah. And people are saying these are real hardline demands that don't sound like they're from a country that's particularly losing a war.
Right.
So, and you mentioned before, both countries want to save face. The new Iranian regime, the new Iranian leadership, they want to, look like they defeated Trump. Yeah. Same with them. How, if you're in Trump's room right now in the Oval Office, how would you tell Trump, hey, this is what we can do to potentially get out of this and maintain the look like you could put lipstick on a pig? Here's how we could solve this. What would you tell him if he asked you, how do I get out of this and look like I won?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the right thing for him to do would be to resign. That'd be the right thing, but obviously that advice wouldn't get you very far. I think it's, look, Mr. President, this is you have an opportunity here to have a modus vivendi, right? Get with the Iranians, use the Omanis, use the Pakistanis, we use the Russians as intermediaries, and allow the Iranians to establish their toll, get the Strait of Hormuz open, go into keep this ceasefire, and then your blockade, seize an Iranian ship once a week. This way you can write about it on Truth Social. It makes you look like you're stopping it. The American public, by and large, doesn't want this war. Do everything you can to mitigate the wave of economic cost that is coming here to the United States, that is going to push up inflation across the board, that's going to cause layoffs, that's going to put us into the real possibility of stagflation. If you allow this thing to escalate again, and you follow the Israelis' plan, as well as the people that you listen to on Fox News, and you destroy Iran's infrastructure, they will destroy the Gulf infrastructure. There's be no doubt about it. The fact, Mr. President, that you could launch and the Israelis can launch attacks on Iranian infrastructure, and the same day the Iranians were hitting like infrastructure in the Gulf states, shows you that, their counter battery capabilities here, their command and control capabilities here. The fact that we haven't dented any of that means that we go back into this war, and now you're not looking at recession, Mr. President, you're looking at depression. What do you think it's going to look like, Mr. President, when a fifth of the world's oil and gas production is offline for 5 years? What do you think happens, right? And all the associated byproducts are offline as well, right? I mean, we're already looking at a really good chance of a recession. We're looking at oil at over $90 a barrel into 2027. The costs of that, do you really want to push it, or do you want to find this modus vivendi with the Iranians? You get to say to your people what you want to say. They get to say what they say. We have essentially, with the nuclear program, you get them to say, which they're willing to, we are not pursuing a nuclear weapon. You get the Russians to guarantee that. You send the Iranian uranium to Russia or to China, but you get some third-party guarantee on this. This allows you to say, look, I met with Putin, I met with Xi. This is what's going to happen with it. The Iranians can't get it to make a bomb. There's all kinds of ways to explain this. But the important thing is that we're avoiding the catastrophe, the cataclysm that will be assured of us if this thing goes back to war and if we start really destroying their infrastructure and they destroy the Gulf infrastructure. I mean, that's essentially how I explained it to him. That's a way out of this. You save face. It allows, it doesn't end the war. It's an indefinite ceasefire. There's all kinds of dangers of that, but that gets you through a few months. And maybe at that point you have something. I mean, the problem, Ed, is Israel. The problem is that, right? I mean, I think, the problem is the Americans who want this war can be distracted with Russia and China. They can be distracted with the idea of Latin America, of recalibrating, reshifting the American empire, refocusing it, following your national security strategy from last year, all those things. The problem is Israel, and it's not even like, look, Mr. President, just hold on. The Israelis get through this election. Netanyahu's out. Yair Lapid or Naftali Bennett or Benny Gantz or whoever is now in charge, and the pressure on you over Iran will be rescinded. That's not the case. There's no one of any political significance in Israel who doesn't have. Look, the only this is the first political pressure we've seen on Netanyahu in the last few years, other than his corruption and criminality. Right? It's because of these ceasefires. Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid form a new party based around the idea that Netanyahu is taking part in a ceasefire. Yeah. A ceasefire where the Israelis are killing dozens of Lebanese every day. It's not a ceasefire, it's a farce. But even that is too much for the moderate opponents of Netanyahu. I mean, so Israel's the problem here. How do you get into that agreement then? Because you could say to the Israelis, look, you get to keep southern Lebanon. But that's not going to fly with Hezbollah. That's not going to fly with most Lebanese. And certainly the Iranians have said that's a red line for us. No, that won't, this deal that we're going to have, if Israel is still occupying southern Lebanon, we're not accepting that deal.
Yeah, even Lebanon says that. I mean, that's not a Hezbollah position. That's a country position.
I mean, I've seen some reporting out of Lebanon, including some poll numbers that show that even though Hezbollah has, 25% popular support in some way or shape, it's almost 50% in the level of Lebanese who don't want them disarmed. You've got half the country for, supporting Hezbollah as a military force within their country, even though they don't support Hezbollah. But they all understand the reality of what they're dealing with, and they hate their government, right? And they understand that this government is in basically the pocket of the Americans and the Israelis, and they're certainly familiar with their own history. So it's, but I mean, this idea of they can't figure out some way to say the Iranian nuclear program is over. It just really bothers me that there's an easy answer, not an easy answer, but again, you send the uranium to Russia or China, you allow Iran to do what it wants. It's pledged to keep it at 3.67 enrichment, right? I mean, they've even pledged to do a moratorium for 5 years on it. Take that. That's a victory. Get yourself out of this. Get yourself out of this war. Yeah. But what's maddening too, of course, is that they don't have a program. They're not trying to build a bomb. So Trump's got us stuck in this war over the fact that he believes the Iranians are doing something they're not doing.
From the beginning, they said that. It was the fatwa.
They've said it for decades. The National Intelligence Estimate of 2007 says the Iranians stopped their nuclear program in 2003. It's been 23 years since they've had a nuclear weapons program. They got a civilian program. They got a research program. They got civilian reactor. They got a research reactor. They got enriched uranium. They got all the things, but do they have actual weapons program? No, they don't. Could they have one? Sure. Could 30 other countries in the world that have nuclear power also have a weapons program? Absolutely. Right. Is Iran a signatory of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty? Yes. Yeah. Is Iran? Yeah. Is Israel a signatory? No. Does Israel have nuclear weapons? Yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, the whole thing, it's just, oh my God, Ed, please make it stop. Please
make it stop. And it's also funny seeing Vance talking they have nothing left. It's just nuclear issue. That's it. Bad oil prices. At least Iran doesn't have a nuke. The country's on fire. At least Iran doesn't have a nuke. That's it. That's what we're
you get the President of the United States saying, "I don't care about Americans' financial situations."
Correct. Before he left for China. Yeah. And Vance was asked about that, and he was like, well, we got to look at that, but Iran cannot have a nuke. And it's like, are you going to use this for everything now going forward?
I thought the Americans I'll give the Americans credit for being able to wage tactical and operational levels of warfare pretty well, right? Strategic and political, that were catastrophic. And this is even worse. The most important thing in warfare is will, right? And that's just not the will of the young Marine with a rifle someplace, right? Or the young soldier who needs to fix bayonets and charge the enemy. That's one part of will. It's a very small part, actually. Will is the actual moral force among the nation, especially among the public, to not just engage in war, but to sustain a war. And the idea that, first of all, you launched this war of choice, this war of aggression with about 30% support for it. So right away, I mean, it's that itself is incredible. But now you're saying Americans' financial situations don't matter. You know, it shows clearly that these people in power have no concept of what they're engaged in here. That if they don't have the support of the American people for this war cannot last. You know, and if Americans understand clearly that the reason why they're paying, $4.50 a gallon for gasoline, and likely to go up to $5 by the beginning of June, $6 by summertime. I mean, we're just starting to hit. I don't know if people understand that there's been a buffer here, that we had really high inventories. We've been playing off those inventories, that the countries around the world have been selling off their strategic petroleum reserves, that the United States has been exporting an extra 3 or 4 million barrels a day, right? In terms of oil exports. That's all coming out of our strategic stockpile. You know, it's going to wear out in a couple of months, a few months. And then it's going to be a real problem. But a lot of countries around the world are already running low on their inventories. And then for the U.S. this week, the last ship from the Persian Gulf, the last oil tanker from the Persian Gulf got to California on Monday, I think it was, right? So it took 2 months for that process to play out. That's here in the U.S. Asia, that last ship showed up 5 weeks ago. For the Europeans, I think it was 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago the last ship showed up. I mean, so, okay, now we're really starting to talk about the supply here, you know, and you say what you want about whatever you're going to do. But if it's the supply issue, that's all that matters. There's no supply. You can't, what are you going to do? You're going to lower the federal gas tax? The 18 cents a gallon we pay on federal gas tax, that's going to save the day. Right? The fact that we literally don't have the product. It's a supply side problem, guys.
But on that note, Matt Ho, Eisenhower Media Network, thank you so much for joining the Trench Journal. As always, I'll have all your links to your Substack and your X account down below. Thank you for joining me.
All right. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. It's crazy, and I don't know what's going to happen, from now until the next time I talk to you. It's like,
I don't know, man. I don't know. I know.
It's just